Hey, Dustin.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Look, we match.
Yeah, we got our what color? I don't even know what color this is.
I'm gonna go with like a Merlot or a Burgundy.
Yeah, it's a burgundy.
How you
Where are
doing?
you? You're in New York, right?
Yeah, I'm New York City based.
Oh, very good. All right.
Yeah,
Well, we're in two heavily locked down towns right now, aren't we?
I know. How are you doing with it all?
Yeah, I mean, I said it a few times. I'm a writer mostly, so I've been on lockdown quarantine my entire career. It's slightly less lonely because now I got a husband and a son and my mother-in-law here with me. So I hear all these strange noises and I wonder what they might be. Usually it's just me and my thoughts.
Yeah. I know. It's. Listen, for me, it's crazy. I'm in a New York apartment, buckled down, but making the most of it, and that's why I created this show. So people are isolating, anxiety's at an all-time high, and I wanted to give people a daily dose of inspiration. And you are somebody who inspires so many people. So thank you for being here.
Oh God. All right. I have to, it's afternoon here, so my inspiration energy is down. So I'm gonna have a little coffee.
Nice. I got some tea too. I'm joining you. And guys, if you have questions for Dustin, leave them in the comments section below, and I'll ask a few as the interview progresses. But Dustin, I mean, congrats on Mama's Boy. That's really why I wanted to have you on to talk about this book. People are loving it, so it must be a good feeling to see it being received so well.
Yeah, it's pretty. You never know. You never know whenever you do anything creative. I mean, you know how this is. Like, you put yourself out there and you hope for the best. It's nerve-wracking enough when I'm telling other people's stories because you still want it to be received well or entertain or move people. But when it's your own, it's freaking terrifying because, But mostly it's my mom's story. And yeah, I didn't really, I still don't quite know how books work. I had my book agent at one point say it's a slow burn. It happens, it builds slowly. And so as a film guy, I think that means days and weeks. But, I just today, for some reason, I saw that the Today Show played a whole piece about it. And I take heart only because it's not my message as much as it was my mom's. And sadly, it's more necessary today than I ever could have imagined when I wrote it.
Yeah, and it's a powerful book. It's about family and reconciliation, and obviously your mom's the star of the book. And you talk about a little bit about your success in film and TV, but the main purpose and messaging of this book, I think, is more so about family triumphs and progression. So, what inspired you to write this book, and why was it important for you to do so?
Well, I mean, originally, when I started writing it, it was a few years ago now, and it was, I was just watching the fires of discord really heat up in the country. This is before the 2016 election. When my mom was still around, she had started to comment on how the normal kind of debates within family, and our family's mostly conservative, that they had heated up to the place where people weren't talking to each other anymore. My mom would get off the phone in tears, and she just said, "This isn't normal. This isn't how we fight." And our family is vocal about how they feel about things, but to no longer speak to your family members because of political leanings was new. And she was worried, and I started looking at it because I kind of grew up in that, and I didn't think much of it, but I thought, boy, it is true. There is a narrative being, propagated, spread, that's growing mostly by, I think, 24-hour news channels and things, that politics is the highest plane of existence. It's the best way to define yourself is whether you put R or D or I on your voter registration card. And the closer you look at that, the more it seems like mental illness. Mm. And I mean, if we accept that we're living in this beautiful, planet, in this magnificent universe, we're just beginning to peek into and understand. We've been gifted with these bodies, these minds, these hearts. We can see, we can hear, we can feel, we can taste, we can fall in love. It's really, truly magical, and all the other things we share this planet with. And you're going to tell me the highest plane of existence in all of that is whether you write Republican or Democrat on your voter registration card, and that is going to determine whether or not you're going to speak to your own family members? That seems like mental illness to me. That seems like we've gotten stuck in a loop just looking into ourselves and our own brains. My mom's life represented, it came to represent, because of the things she survived, a person who was willing to have the courage to go meet people who thought differently than she did, and the curiosity, and she tried to instill this in me, to actually listen more than you talk. I'm not doing that very well right now on this Instagram Live. But because of that, I watched how that philosophy, that combination of courage and curiosity, had the power to, if you utilized it, to build bridges. And in fact, to build bridges where news shows are saying it's absolutely impossible, across political divides, geographic divides, religious divides, and where my family comes from in the South, racial divides. And so I thought it's a necessary story. I always tell, I teach some screenwriting stuff here and there. And I always say a story from the past really has no power if it's not going to influence or change the future. It's got to be strong enough that it cracks things open, creates some good chaos, messes things up enough that people can start to rethink. And I thought, well, I hope my mom's story was powerful enough to do that for me. Maybe it is for other people. And boy, I would love for us to understand that though politics is important, and I participate in it in a big way, it is not the highest plane of existence, not by a long shot. The thing I could never have anticipated, and you sort of alluded to it, is that it would come out in the midst of this pandemic, because the book begins with an epidemic that my mother was a victim of, called polio, which actually is quite similar in terms of the numbers. Most people infected never even knew it, but if you were in that 5 percentile, many died, most lost the use of their limbs. For my mother, it meant she lost the use of everything up to her chest. So she was paralyzed from 2 years old on. And and it's just in there in a way that I hadn't planned, and maybe that's best because it doesn't hit you over the head, but it certainly is also an examination of the silver linings that can come from surviving an epidemic or a pandemic. It's all about the window that kind of experience, the terror, the loss, that can also throw open a window of understanding that can be quite valuable.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful story you share in the book, and you share a lot. I mean, the coming out story when you came out to your mother was something that I think is going to resonate with a lot of people. Everyone has a different story, of course, but you said it was the beginning of a journey that really led you to rebuild your relationship with your mom. So how did you feel at that moment of your life when you were able to come out, and how did the course of your relationship change?
Well, I mean, I actually didn't say the words. I don't know, where's your family from? Out of curiosity.
Mine?
Yeah.
Jersey. Jersey Italian, baby.
Okay. My stepdad, who I love, and we talk about him in the book. He was a savior in our family. He's from Jersey. Been there a lot. Our family, is a Southern family, Southern conservative military Mormon family. And let me tell you, a Southern mom, she can read your mind. Like, I never, ever once had to say the word gay. She came into my bedroom while I was visiting from college. She came into the bedroom. It was Christmas night. And she sat on the bed and just wanted to talk, because that's what we usually did. And when she started railing about don't ask, don't tell, because she thought it was too progressive, she thought allowing closeted gay people into the military was too progressive. I sat and just prayed that I wouldn't cry, wouldn't shed a tear. And that prayer was not answered. And I did cry. And she read those tears and knew. And it didn't go well. I mean, I remember it was the only time, and if you read the book, this is all in there, but it was the only time in my life I ever acknowledged her great difference. And she was sitting there on my bed, her spine twisted like an S from the scoliosis that the polio brought on. Her legs, what was left of them, they were really very shriveled inside of metal braces, and behind her crutches. And the only question she had for me was why would I choose something like this, and clearly disappointed, clearly heartbroken, clearly terrified. And so I just looked at her braces and I looked at her crutches. And I asked her why she chose those. And it wasn't resolved, but I think that cracked something open. And what was really consequential was within that next year, I'd go on to be the first in my family to graduate from college. And she actually showed up, which is not an easy thing for a paralyzed person to do, is to get on a plane by herself, fly from, at that point, Virginia, all the way out to LA. And when she arrived at my house, it was jam-packed with my friends and my roommates' friends. My roommates happened to be like two gay guys. One my mother had known for ages, named Ryan Elizalde. He might be on here. And sorry, Ryan, but I'm going to describe you how you used to look if you are on here. He looked kind of like if Freddie Mercury was actually a porn star, a Latino Freddie Mercury porn star, like giant mustache. Oftentimes his clothes held together with safety pins, and flaming gay. And my other roommate was gay as well, and we had all these gay and lesbian friends in the house, and I completely copped out. I'm going to give you the fast version because the better version's in the book, but I had not told my friends my mom was homophobic because I did not want that to be true. And I had not told my mom that so many of my friends were gay and lesbian. And the short version is I dismissed myself to the kitchen just to like cook. We were making like pasta, like terrible pasta, and drinking cheap college wine. And my mom started listening to all the stories that my friends were telling her because my mother was Southern. She was not going to chew them out to their face. She was just going to nod them to death, as good Southern mothers do. And they started to tell her the stories. This is, the early 90s. Ellen has not come out. Will and Grace do not exist yet. So my mother, in their eyes, because they assumed she accepted me, is like the gay Mother Teresa. Mm. So they start telling her the stories of how they couldn't go home anymore, rejected, kicked out, whatever abuse they'd survived. At this point, so many people were coming to LA because it was warm enough you didn't freeze on the streets if you were kicked out of your house. It was not an uncommon story. And my mom just was nodding and nodding and nodding. And finally, the party was over. People were leaving. We had a graduation the next day. My roommates knew everything going on, so they're terrified. They head to their rooms. And I sit down next to my mother when she insists upon it. And I just remember there's this cute guy who was older than me. He was a graduate student. And I had a huge crush, and he didn't want to give me the time of day. And my mother somehow met him, sussed all this out, as she would, as a Southern mother sleuth will. And so all she says to me, because there's a bunch of silence, I feel heat radiating off of her, and she says, "Oh, I met your friend." I was like, "Oh, okay." She said, "I met the graduate student." I said, "Oh, okay." She said, "Well, I told him that I think he should think twice about his estimation of you, and that perhaps he ought to bring you to dinner, and because he's the older one, he should pay." And I just remember looking over, and there she was with her eyes filled with tears, and then mine are filled with tears. And she just grabs a hold of me, and she wraps her arms around me so tight. And it was the first time I ever knew my mother loved me for every bit of me. And the thing that you touched upon is that did change my life. It changed my view of how we communicate with each other. It changed my view of family and love, because it literally, after all of the arguments she had heard or studied, or all the lies or misinformation or distortions she might have learned about LGBT people, were all gone in a night. I could have argued with her for years and that would have never happened. And so if I sat and thought about it, it was because my friends assumed that she had no problem with gay people, so they didn't fight her. They just shared their stories. They didn't come at her with all the facts and the science and the Constitution, even though I'm sure those are all on our side. So she didn't have to come back at them with her arguments from the Mormon church or the military or from having grown up. So we didn't get into that kind of heady debate that you see on, bless them, but the news shows. And so guess what actually happened? She got to hear personal stories told from the heart. Look them in the eye, which is, honest to God, the best lie detector on the planet is just to look someone in the eye. And the best place for that to happen is over a dinner table, I think. Have that courage to show up, look people in the eye, the curiosity to hear their stories. And if they speak to you from the heart and you listen and you do the same, that heart can actually change a mind. That's how you change a mind. Fighting about the science or the politics, you know, or the law, no matter how right you are, it's rarely going to do any good. It's just going to make you hate each other more. But if you can be courageous enough to share your own personal story, to look someone in the eye when you do it, you got a shot. You got a chance. But it means you have to be willing to listen as much as you're talking.
Right.
And that's not always easy. Let me tell you, it's, you know, in the last third of the book, I challenged myself to repay that favor, to repay that gift she gave me. It's not even a favor. But that meant, as happy as and I'm very progressive, as happy as progressives are for people to come our way, we have to be willing to get in our cars, travel when it's safe again, and sit with people who disagree with us and to listen to them as well. And you're going to hear some tough stuff. It's not always going to be easy. But I guarantee you, if you can sit there for a while, easier in the South where you can have some Jack Daniels, tougher in Utah. And I went back to Utah and Texarkana. Those were my two spots. In Utah, you can't have any of that, not even Dr. Pepper for courage. So, but if you can do that, you'll find common ground. Common ground that the news shows pretend doesn't exist.
Well, I think that's a really refreshing perspective to have. It's you clearly have your own political beliefs, but you're somebody who encourages dialogue and you encourage conversation. You don't shut people out because they have a different opinion.
Well, yeah, because we're stuck here together. You know what I mean? Here we are. It's also like I'm a dad now. That's opened my eyes in many ways. Like your children are going to learn from you. And if what they learn from you is we don't get too close to anything that seems too different, well, that's horrible. And that doesn't set them up for success. So I think it's a challenge sometimes, but we got to do it. It's we're living in such a lame time right now, so immature, just because you would disagree with someone, you damn them to hell, you cancel them. I just think it's like, that's the easy way out. It's so easy to cancel someone. It's
right.
Much harder to sit across from someone who has hurt you, offended you, who thinks differently of you, who thinks the law ought not protect you. It's much harder to sit across from them and to see if you can't figure it out. You won't always figure it out. There are such things as assholes. There are such things as sociopaths.
Right.
And you just have to walk away from them. But and you might call me an optimist for this, I don't believe most people are sociopaths. I think there's one in the White House right now, but I don't think most people are.
Yeah, and you're encouraging people to have conversation, which I love. I think that's super important. And another thing I really like is you said one of your hopes for your book is you want to teach people who were told that they're way too different to exist in this world, have a place in this world, that's a big fat lie. What do you mean by that?
Well, this is one of those things this is one of the gifts that came from being raised by a mother who just barely survived the plague. And she barely survived, what it left her with were scars that ran the length of her body, every limb, because in one of the hospitals she was in, they used a philosophy of the blade with polio. She had that incredibly twisted spine. She couldn't walk, just on braces and crutches. And she looked very, very, very different. And I'll tell you what, there was many a time I saw people staring. I saw, or people absolutely write her off or ignore her. And she looked just too different for a lot of people. And you could discount her. But if you discounted her, you missed out on a whole lot. And, I'll always be grateful for my survival and beyond to the U.S. military, of all places, for giving her a job. And not only, you know, she started in a supply closet in an Army hospital in San Antonio, Texas. And by the end of her career, she was running the biggest, most esteemed immunology department in the United States of America in Washington, D.C., where the president goes for care. Trying her very best to make sure epidemics and pandemics like this don't hurt people the way she was hurt. And so if you discounted her, you wouldn't have been able to find that power and that strength and that wisdom and that drive to make sure people didn't suffer like she did. But the U.S. military saw it. Now, I also know I'm different than most people because I fall in love with men, the same gender. I'm married to a man. But I also have firsthand knowledge that the outsider status, that point of view, that perspective is what's made me an artist. That's made me who I am. There is nothing more valuable as a creative, and I think in other roles, as a little bit of a step outside so you can look at it, you can understand it, you can be objective about it. I also think that it just doesn't take a whole lot of smarts to understand that if you have a problem, let's say this is the problem, there's the problem. If you get 10 of the exact same people looking at it, well, how is that any better than just one? If you get 10 people from all over the globe, a lot of different experiences, right? They might look different, sound different, believe different, pray different. You're going to get a lot of different ideas of how to solve that problem. And I bet you could solve it faster. That's just common sense. But yet you still see some parents walking their kids down the street. And when somebody is sitting there or passing by who might just look a little too different, you see them pull that kid in a little tighter. And that's where the bad lessons start. That's where the unlearning will have to begin. I think, you know, when you see somebody a little bit too different, like my mom, you might just give a smile and a wave. If you're courageous, you might ask a question because you're going to learn something. So I just think all of these ideas that difference is somehow something to be ashamed of, well, that's something being peddled by stupid people. Sorry. If you want to succeed, understand the power of diversity and build that team.
I couldn't agree more. And you're somebody who continues to put out important messages that matter, you know, including your obvious movie, Milk, which people went crazy over, myself included. You won the Academy Award for that movie. And it really just resonated with everyone in such a big way. I'll never forget sitting in that theater watching that and thinking, oh my God, I feel like there's a movie out that makes me feel seen and accepted and part of a community. And you didn't really see much of that at that time. And that was really a tremendous thing you did.
That was a special moment. We certainly never thought, you know, and it's still a we thing. I mean, it took an army to make that, but it was my baby for a very, very long time. And I heard a lot of no's. Anyone out there trying to do something special, you only need one yes. Remember that, just one yes. And we only got one from Focus Features after years of trying to get it made. And so, we fought for our one yes, and, you know, thank goodness. But I will say this, it's not enough. I mean, I'll keep trying to make the movies I'm making and tell the stories I'm telling, but, you know, LGBT history has been buried in shame, buried in fear. You know, if you try to tell a story like Milk, even 30 years ago, 40 years ago, right when it all went down, I mean, in many states, you'd be considered a criminal, mentally ill. It was illegal to be gay. It was considered a mental illness to be gay. It's, you know, of course, you wouldn't put yourself out there in that way. You'd lose your home. You'd lose your job. Still in the United States, you'd lose your home, you'd lose your job legally if someone finds out you're gay. So, you know, we have so much rebuilding to do. Many other minorities or people treated differently under the law, they have these rich narratives. And so, you know, when you're feeling lonely or, you know, dejected because of how you're being treated, you have some books or movies or TV shows, popularized versions of your history to turn to, or even parents who understand your minority status. For the most part, gay people don't have any of that. And so I call constantly. LGBTQ people are so diverse. We come from everywhere. We look like the world. So we need to have movies that look like that diverse. And we're slowly getting there. There's more green lights happening. I see more diverse representations of LGBTQ people, but Milk's not going to do it. And we got a lot to do.
Well, you're certainly doing your part. And what's fascinating is after all of that success, you kind of took a step back for a minute and you went to the Supreme Court to start fighting for marriage equality. So what inspired you to do that, and what did doing that mean to you?
Well, that's my mom's fault. I say it, and I don't know if people always get it, but I learned how to succeed and win politically really progressive causes, cases, votes, ballot measures. I learned how to do it from a conservative mom, a conservative military Mormon mom. And one of her first rules was, never accept crumbs, demand the full thing, because no one's going to give you the full thing. So if you demand crumbs, you're going to get less than crumbs. Very good Southern wisdom. She also said, stand up for yourself. If somebody steals your lunch money and you got to fight them on the corner, fight them on the corner. Even if you lose, you stood up for yourself. And that sends a strong message. I know this is very Southern conservative stuff, but it sends a strong message. It says loud and clear, I believe I deserve to be treated better. And last but not least, my mother said, a promise is a sacred thing. And when I won that Academy Award for Milk, I made a promise on that stage that young people would have federal equality in their lifetimes. But my mother reminded me, she said, well, you just made a very, very big promise. And so a promise is a sacred thing, Lancer. I remember her saying that to me in my living room, my house in LA. She was stony-eyed, I was teary-eyed. And so it meant I had to figure out how to do that. And I couldn't do it alone. But thankfully, we built a little team that believed we could achieve marriage equality at the federal level in our lifetimes. And we just started doing our homework. How do other civil rights fights work? How have they worked? How have they succeeded? And once we'd done that homework, we hired the best lawyers we could in a bipartisan way, because we didn't want this to be a partisan issue. So we hired the best Republican and the best Democrat lawyer, Supreme Court lawyers. And then we found our plaintiffs. And we sued the state of California in federal court, saying Proposition 8 was unconstitutional and that marriage was a right, a civil right. And it was the first of those cases. I'll never forget Chad Griffin, who would go on to run the Human Rights Campaign, said to me at one point, listen, I've worked with a lot of celebrity people who like to get into politics. And the truth of the matter is, you can't do both well at the same time. And I thought, all right. So, and I tried to do both for a little while. And I'll tell you, I made some of the worst shit I've ever made in my career. I hope, I'm sure people can dig up the titles if you can find them. And then I gave up on trying to do both. And I just focused on the marriage equality case. And it was great. It was wonderful to see Prop 8 overturned. It was amazing to see what the other cases did and to see how rapidly this idea, when you don't demand crumbs, but you demand the full thing, how hot that fire gets. And the respect it wins. My mom was right. We demanded the full thing. And even people in the South, even my own conservative family was like, all right, good on you. You stood up to the bully who stole your lunch money. You said I deserve it all. Props. I'll respect that. And people did.
And what's amazing is you've accomplished so much. You won the Academy Award. You went to the Supreme Court. But in your book, you don't really spend a ton of time focused on that. You talk about mainly your mother. And I'm curious to know what made you make that decision? Because anyone could easily spend hours and hours writing about everything that they've accomplished, but you focused on so much that didn't center around that.
Yeah, I think you have to, as a writer and maybe even as a human being, you have to ask yourself, well, what's my intention? Why am I doing this? By the way, when you start texting people, maybe ask yourself that. I know what you want to write, what you want to say, what you want to do, but what's your intention? What do you want the effect of it to be? And that's really important when you're writing, because you have to think about the whole idea is that you're going to throw a pebble into a pond. So do you want it literally, do you want the little waves that come off that pebble just to radiate back to me and feed my ego? Well, what the fuck does that do? So we can swear on Instagram, right?
That's right.
I hope. But what, I don't know what that does. And, or I do know people who just do that, and it's, it burns out. It's not a thing. It's not like, why are we on the planet? And so my intention with it was to see if I thought I had a story that really spoke to our times. I found it inspirational. I felt like it corrects the record. And so I thought it wise to put it out there. But yeah, nobody wants to watch other people pat themselves on the back. That's boring.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And the story you're telling is super important and resonating with a lot of people. People are commenting like crazy how much they love your book. And I've seen a lot of questions as well coming in from people who are having trouble with their own families. And you mentioned coming from a homophobic family, and having to deal with that and hopefully grow with people in your family. And I've seen some people commenting they're wishing for the same type of growth. So do you have any advice for anyone going through that tough time?
Yeah. I mean, are you talking like specifically coming out in any way, I guess?
Just really having family accept them, I think is the main thing I've been seeing.
I mean, I can speak to my experience and the people who I've been around. Like not everyone's going to have the experience my husband did, where he came out to his mom and she was like, great. Okay. What else? What are we going to do tonight? What's for dinner? Mine was not like that. Mine, those two stories where my mom figured out to when I graduated, there was a long time between then. Advice, things I've heard work, and that I think work, or help. Some parents, and I know mine was terrified that she lost her son. That I was suddenly I had made a choice and it was going to be very, very different from here on out. And parents, I mean, for the most part, they love their kids. They raised you. You're their greatest project of their life. And to think that you're going to suddenly vanish into some new, strange world they don't understand, that's terrifying for them. So if you can slip in a sentence and say, by the way, I've always been like this. I've always known this. Literally nothing has changed about me today. The only thing that's changed is what you know. That seems simple to the gay people and obvious, but it's not simple and obvious to your parents. You might want to say that. Two, do not do what I did. Do not do it around major holidays. It's too dramatic. Don't try to take the drama down. It's if you're living at home, if you're dependent on your family, make absolute certain you have a support group, that you have somebody who you can turn to on the other side of it, so that you're not isolated. Isolation can be dangerous. And so I would suggest that. Most importantly, and this is the whole idea of this book, most importantly, and it's hard, leave those avenues of communication open. So often I know how hard it was. I used to talk to my mom on the phone every day, and after she found out, that went down to like once a week, maybe. I mean, it's really not helpful. It's really not helpful. They need to be reassured. Family needs to be reassured that you haven't joined a cult, that this is, because that's what often they're going to think, and that this is, who you are, and it's true, you haven't changed. They're just going to know more. That's really helpful for a lot of people.
And I think it's really inspiring to see too the life you've created. You're successful, you're married, you have a beautiful family now. I've seen a lot of questions come in on what has fatherhood taught you, and do you feel closer to your mom now being a father?
Oh, that's a sweet question, Tommy. Yeah, I mean, it is. I said I wanted to have this experience in my life. I always knew I wanted to be a dad. I was raised Mormon. Are you kidding me? We're supposed to, I should have like 12 kids and 40 grandkids by now. But it's really, you just don't know what it is until you've had a child. I was looking at pictures today of Anderson Cooper, looking at his child and newborn, and I just couldn't stop smiling. That moment that he's having in that photograph, I remember so clearly. And everything changes. It's all different. And you are looking at the world through a new set of eyes. Of course, you have all this responsibility. And some of it is, yes, I know how to warm a bottle to perfection, to change a nappy like lightning. I can do all of that now. But I also understand the challenges and the great reward of putting your needs second or even third, and so but it of course makes me, it's a little bit of a heartbreak, to be completely honest, because I lost both my mom, and as a spoiler, I lost my mom and my big brother around the same time. And so the two people who could answer my questions about, like, hey, did I do that? Was I like that? How do you handle this issue? They're gone. So I don't know how my mom did most of that. And I was abandoned by my father. And so there's just no one around who's alive or around to ask. And it honestly tears me up inside, because my mother couldn't use her legs or her body. She had 3 little boys, a 2-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 10-year-old, raising by herself. How did she do it? Nobody knows.
Yeah.
I don't know how she did it.
It's amazing. She seems like an amazing woman.
Yeah.
And my last question for you, I guess it's more of a statement. I want you to finish the sentence for me. Inclusion is.
Oh God. I'm just going to use it for me personally. Inclusion is the secret to success. It is. Inclusion is the secret to authentic stories told authentically. So if I write a TV show or a movie, I better have people around who know what that experience is that these characters are having. Unless I write characters that are all like white gay guys of a certain age, like, I better have an inclusive writer's room, production staff, cast, so that inclusion is helpful in that way. Inclusion is the pathway to truth, authenticity, and success. I think that probably applies to other occupations beyond being a filmmaker.
100%. Thank you so much for coming on. You are literally the definition of what unity is, what celebrating life is, what having open, honest conversation is. And so many people here have been saying how inspired they are by you, and that is exactly why I wanted you to join today.
Can I just leave you with one thing?
Yes.
Who's cutting your hair? Because I need them to come over here. You have like a perfect haircut. We're weeks into this.
No, it's great. It's just matted down with product. It's all,
I mean, it is like out to there. It's
all secrets. I'm an Italian boy. I know how to handle hair. I get out of the shower.
Right.
It's like.
All right. Well, I've been looking at it this whole time, and I'm jealous. So you and your gorgeous hair, you go away. You get lost.
Thank you so much for coming on. It was very nice to talk to you.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.